It wasn't just what she said, it was how her voice shook when she said it, like she already knew I'd never really leave. It was one of those late evenings that felt too gentle to end. The kind where laughter has already faded, glasses sit half empty, and silence settles in like an old friend. Everyone else had left hours ago. Only she and I remained. She moved around the living room, picking up the last few wine glasses, her bare feet silent against the wooden floor. I offered to help, and she smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that made no sound unnecessary. We worked in rhythm without speaking much. I stacked plates. She folded the linen napkins, her movements graceful and unhurried. Outside, the city murmured, cars whispering by, a dog barking somewhere far away. The kind of distant life that reminds you how still your own moment is. There is something about her presence that didn't demand attention. It drew it, naturally. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She didn't need to. The faint lines around her eyes told stories I hadn't heard yet. Stories I wanted to. When she reached across the table to pick up a glass, my hand moved at the same time. Our fingers brushed, a fleeting touch, but it sent something sharp and soft through me. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. She only looked up, eyes steady, unreadable, before turning to place the glass in the sink. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged. I could smell the faint scent of vanilla candles burning low on the shelf, their glow softening the edges of her shadow as she moved. The clock ticked slowly in the background. Time felt like it was watching us, not passing. "Thank you for staying to help," she said finally, breaking the quiet. Her voice was low, slightly tired, but warm, the kind that lingered after the words were gone. I told her it was nothing, that I didn't mind, and I meant it. She leaned against the counter then, her arms folded loosely. "You know," she said, eyes drifting toward the window, "I used to hate when nights got this quiet. Now, I think I crave it. Something about that hit deeper than it should have. Maybe because I knew that kind of quiet, the kind that isn't peace, but something closer to loneliness dressed in calm." I nodded, unsure what to say, and joined her by the counter. From this close, I noticed the small details, the faint freckles on her collarbone, the way her hair fell against her neck, the way her reflection shimmered in the glass behind her. For a moment, I just stood there listening, to the room, to her breathing, to everything unspoken. And I remember thinking, if the night ended right here, I'd still remember it. Not because of anything that happened, but because of everything that almost did. The rain began softly, a distant whisper against the windows, as if the night itself wanted an excuse to keep me there a little longer. She turned toward the kitchen, gathering the empty cups with quiet precision. Then she looked over her shoulder, almost shyly. "Tea?" she asked. It sounded simple, but there was something in her tone, a question folded inside a question. I nodded, maybe too quickly. She smiled, that small, tired smile again, and filled the kettle. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. The light above the counter cast a warm halo across her hair, catching every copper strand that had loosened through the evening. She tucked one behind her ear, and I caught myself noticing how deliberate even that small gesture felt, like she was aware of the space between us and how easily it could close. The kettle began to hum, a soft promise of warmth. She asked about my work, what I wanted to do next, what I was chasing. I gave a few half-honest answers, but she kept looking at me in that patient way that made small talk feel pointless. "You don't sound convinced," she said, half teasing, half gentle. I laughed quietly. Maybe I'm still figuring it out. She nodded. "That's a good place to be. Most people pretend they've already found it." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled. The rain was heavier now, drumming softly against the glass. The whole world felt wrapped inside that sound, closed off, safe. When she poured the tea, the steam curled up between us, carrying the faint scent of mint and honey. She held one cup out to me. For a second, our fingers touched. It wasn't accidental this time, not careless. Her skin was warm against mine, and something quiet passed through that touch, something neither of us acknowledged but both felt. "Careful," she murmured, voice barely above the hum of the kettle. "It's hot." I don't think she was talking about the tea. We sat by the window, each holding a cup, watching the rain streak down the glass. The light reflected off the droplets, turning them into tiny falling stars. She asked if I liked the sound of rain. I do, I said. It makes everything feel slower. Honest. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression softening. That's a rare thing, honesty. Something about the way she said it made me want to tell her everything, all the things I never said out loud. But I didn't. I just let the silence stretch, gentle and heavy. When she set her cup down, her hand brushed mine again. Deliberate this time, lasting just long enough to feel real. And when I finally looked up, her eyes met mine, calm, steady, and impossibly close. Neither of us moved. The world outside could have vanished, and I wouldn't have noticed. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for words. Only closeness. The rain had grown stronger. Not a storm, but a steady, rhythmic downpour that wrapped the world in sound. Through the window, the city blurred into soft streaks of silver and amber. Headlights passed like ghosts. The air was cool now, touched with the scent of wet soil and the faint sweetness of the candle still burning on the table. She walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside, just enough to watch. You might have to wait it out, she said, her voice quiet, almost hopeful. I joined her there. Not too close, just near enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her shoulder. We stood side by side, staring into the rain. The reflection in the glass showed us together. Her profile calm and graceful, mine uncertain but drawn in. I noticed how her breathing slowed when I stepped closer, how her eyes softened when the thunder rolled faintly in the distance. It's strange, she murmured, how peaceful it sounded from inside. I nodded. Maybe because we're safe here. She turned her head slightly, enough for our eyes to meet through that dim reflection. Safe, she repeated softly, as if tasting the word. There was something fragile in the way she said it, like safety was a feeling she hadn't trusted in a while. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was rain, steady, constant, like a heartbeat that belonged to the night itself. I could see tiny droplets running down the glass, each one tracing a small path until it disappeared into the blur below. Without thinking, I reached to adjust the curtain. My arm brushed against hers, barely, but it was enough to send a quiet jolt through me. She didn't move away. Her scent, lavender and rain, filled the small space between us. I could feel the warmth of her presence, the softness of her breathing, the closeness that had crept in so naturally neither of us noticed when it began. Then, quietly, she said, "It's been a long time since someone stayed this late." Her tone wasn't an invitation. It was a confession. I turned to look at her. Her gaze was still on the rain, but her expression had changed. Eyes distant, lips pressed together in something that looked a lot like longing. "I didn't mean to," I said softly. "I know," she whispered. And then, after a pause that felt like an eternity, "But I don't mind." That single sentence carried more warmth than the tea in our hands, more truth than anything we'd said all night. Outside, the rain kept falling, harder now, as if trying to blur the world away and leave just this room, this silence, and the fragile space between us. And in that silence, something invisible shifted, not spoken, not shown, but felt deeply, quietly, completely. We drifted back to the couch when the rain softened again. The room was dim now, just the soft flicker of candlelight and the occasional flash of distant lightning spilling through the curtains. The world outside was fading, but inside, everything felt sharper, closer. She sat at one end of the couch, tucking one leg beneath her. I sat near the other, close enough to feel the warmth she gave off, but far enough to pretend we were still keeping distance. She looked tired, though not from a night, from something older, deeper. The kind of tired that hides behind polite smiles and quiet grace. "You ever feel," she began, eyes fixed on her teacup, "like life just drifted past you while you were busy, doing everything right?" Her voice trembled just slightly, as if unsure whether it wanted to be heard. I hesitated. Sometimes, I admitted, I think it happens when we start living by what's expected, not by what's real. She gave a small laugh, not amused, more like she was remembering something. "That's exactly it," she whispered. "I spent years being what everyone needed me to be. And when I finally stopped, I realized I didn't even know what I wanted anymore." She looked up then, meeting my eyes. There was no attempt to hide the vulnerability there, no mask, no distance. Just honesty, raw and quiet. The air between us shifted. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, the rhythmic sound of rain against the window. Everything else disappeared. I wanted to reach for her hand, just to tell her she wasn't alone, but something about her expression stopped me. It wasn't sadness I saw. It was strength, the kind that comes from surviving what most people never see. "You know," she said softly, her gaze wandering to the candlelight, "people think being alone is lonely. But sometimes it's the only time you can finally hear yourself think." I nodded, my voice low. "And sometimes it's the only time you realize what's missing." She smiled, a small, knowing smile that barely lifted her lips. Then she leaned back against the couch and closed her eyes for a moment. The glow of the candlelight brushed against her face, tracing the gentle lines near her eyes, the curve of her mouth. Her hand rested close to mine, just close enough to feel the warmth radiating through the narrow space between us. Neither of us moved to bridge it, but we both felt it, that pull, quiet and undeniable. The rain outside had slowed to a soft drizzle, the kind that sounds like breathing. And in that stillness, surrounded by the hush of night, she whispered, "It's strange how easy it is to talk to you." I smiled faintly, maybe because you're finally being heard. Her eyes opened then, and for the first time, I saw something in them that wasn't guarded. It wasn't loneliness. It was connection, fragile, fleeting, but real. And that was the moment I realized, sometimes the most intimate thing isn't touch. It's being trusted with someone's silence. The storm returned without warning, a low roll of thunder that trembled through the walls. The lights flickered once, then dimmed into darkness. She gave a small gasp, half laughing as the room fell quiet except for the rain and the beating of our hearts. "Well," she said, her voice soft in the dark, "I guess we just lost the night." I found the box of candles she kept on a shelf. My fingers brushed hers as I handed her one, and in that faint, accidental touch, something inside me stilled. When the first candle lit, its glow spread slowly across her face, a soft golden wash that turned her eyes into something alive. The flame flickered in her pupils, dancing like it knew the truth neither of us could speak aloud. She sat back on the couch, one hand cupped around the candle to steady its light. The shadows made her look both older and impossibly young, like time itself couldn't decide what to do with her. "Thank you," she whispered as I sat beside her again. "For what?" "For not leaving." There was no teasing in her tone this time, just quiet sincerity, the kind that lands somewhere deep, where words don't usually reach. "I didn't want to," I said, and it came out more honest than I expected. She turned her face toward me. The candle between us flickered again, and for a moment the light wavered, a soft pulse that made the space between our hands seem unbearably small. When she shifted slightly, her knee brushed mine. The contact was light, almost nothing, yet my whole body reacted, not with impulse, but awareness, the kind that feels sacred. Her voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. "You should probably go before it gets harder to—" I looked at her then, really looked, and saw the hesitation in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of what might happen. She was afraid of what it would mean if it did. The thunder rumbled again, softer this time, like a distant reminder that time was still moving. But neither of us moved. I reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. My thumb brushed the inside of her wrist as I steadied the candle she was holding. Her breath caught quiet and sharp, like she'd been holding it all night. "Careful," she murmured. The flame wavered, then steadied, the only witness to the small tremor that passed between us. Her skin was warm beneath my fingertips, her pulse faint but steady. I didn't hold her hand. I didn't need to. That single touch said everything, that we were both standing on the edge of something we didn't have a name for. We sat there in silence, two people framed by candlelight, pretending not to be falling, pretending not to know. And in that fragile stillness, I understood. Sometimes love begins not with a kiss, but with the fear of one. When the storm eased, the silence it left behind felt almost unreal, as if the whole house was holding its breath. The candle still burned between us, its flame smaller now, the wax pooled around its base. I stood slowly, unsure why. Maybe I thought movement would make leaving easier. Maybe I needed distance before I forgot how to find it. She watched me from the couch, her posture calm, but her eyes, they were something else. Soft, uncertain, and unbearably open. "You're really going?" she said quietly. Not a question, just a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable. "I should," I whispered. She nodded once. Her gaze dropped to her hands, folded loosely in her lap. "Yes, you should." But neither of us moved. I walked toward the door anyway, my steps slow, deliberate, every one of them heavier than the last. The rain had become nothing more than a light drizzle outside. Streetlights shimmered against the wet pavement, their glow slipping through the window like spilled gold. When I reached for the doorknob, my fingers hesitated. I could hear her breathing behind me, steady, quiet, a sound I'd somehow memorized in just one night. Then came her voice. Soft, fragile, but it stopped me cold. "If you stay tonight," her words trailed off for a moment, as if she was deciding whether to finish them. When she finally did, they broke the air like something sacred. "I'll never let you go again." The sound of it lingered, not just in the room, but somewhere deeper. I turned around slowly. She was standing now, her bare feet silent against the floor, her eyes glistening with something that wasn't quite tears. Her voice was steadier when she spoke again. "I mean it," she said. "If you stay, it won't be just for tonight. It never is." There was no plea in her tone, no drama. Just honesty, pure and trembling. I took a step toward her. She didn't back away. "I don't want to hurt you," I said softly. "You won't," she replied. "You already could have, and you didn't." Another step. We were close now. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath mingling with mine. Her hand rose slightly, almost touching my chest, then stopped halfway, uncertain. I caught it gently, just held it there between us. Her fingers trembled once, then steadied. The candle flickered. The rain outside had stopped completely. "Then say it again," I whispered. She looked up at me, eyes searching, voice barely there. "If you stay tonight," she repeated, the faintest smile trembling on her lips. "I'll never let you go again." And in that moment, I finally understood. She wasn't asking me to stay out of loneliness. She was asking because she'd found something real, something fragile, something she was terrified to lose. So I stood there, caught between leaving and never being able to walk away again. And I knew the line had already been crossed. The night didn't end the way either of us expected. No dramatic goodbye, no sudden confession, just a silence that felt almost full. I didn't stay, but I didn't really leave either. When I finally stepped out into the rain, it had turned to a fine mist, more like memory than weather. The air was cool, carrying that earthy scent that only comes after a storm, clean, fragile, alive. She stood by the doorway as I walked to my car, her arms wrapped loosely around herself. No words, just the faint curve of a smile that said everything we didn't. I waved once before starting the engine, and for a second I thought I saw her hand lift, a small, hesitant motion, but maybe I imagined it. Now it's morning. The storm is gone, and the city is wrapped in that soft, golden haze that follows rain. Sunlight catching on rooftops, puddles reflecting pale skies. Her house stands quiet, still holding the echo of the night. Inside, she walks slowly through the living room. The candles are melted to pools of wax. The two empty teacups sit forgotten near the window, faint rings left on the table. And then she sees it, the scarf I'd left draped over the chair. A small, ordinary thing, but the moment her fingers touch it, something inside her shifts. She holds it gently, bringing it to her chest, closing her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she smiles, not the polite kind, but the quiet one that comes from somewhere deep where memories live. I think about her even now, the way she looked at me that night, not like someone waiting to be loved, but someone who'd finally stopped pretending she didn't want to be. I didn't stay. Maybe I couldn't. But part of me never left that room. That flickering candlelight, that soft, steady rain, that look in her eyes when she said those words. If you stay tonight, I'll never let you go again. It wasn't a warning. It was a truth. She knew herself too well to make promises she couldn't keep. She would have held on, completely, fiercely, and without apology. And maybe that's why I had to leave, because part of love is knowing when you're not ready for the weight of being someone's peace. Still, as the morning sun warms the windows of her home, I imagine her standing there, scarf in hand, looking out at the quiet world, and I know she feels it too. That what happened wasn't fleeting. Some connections don't fade. They settle, quiet, steady, somewhere beneath the noise of ordinary life. And maybe, one day, when the sky turns that same soft gray again, I'll find myself driving past her street, slowing down without knowing why. And she'll be there, maybe by the window, still graceful, still calm, still the woman who once said, "If you stay tonight, I'll never let you go again."